Right, if everyone's ready,
Should we do a sync point?
yes, we should. We
Okay,
absolutely
you
should.
you count us down.
All right, three, two, one. Well,
All
there we
right.
go.
Now we're real podcasters.
Now
We've got
we're
a
real
sync point and
podcasters.
everything. So I think it would be really funny if we should we introduce each other by ourselves by username
Hold
or
on.
by like our given name
Can we
or
do the
yeah.
sync point again? I've just started recording.
Sure.
Okay.
No, that is totally fine.
Now we're
Okay.
real podcasters. We had to do two sync points because one local wasn't working.
Okay. Okay. Three, two, one. All
Hopefully
right.
that picked up.
Hopefully,
It picked up.
probably. To bring up the question, should we introduce each other by given name or by our usernames? I think it would be funny if if instead of credentials we just said what our day jobs are. I think that would be funny.
That would be funny, but also very confusing.
It would be, but no one will listen to this who doesn't know us, which is why I think it's funny.
I mean, sure.
So if you want usernames or given names, well, or something else entirely.
No, I think probably usernames.
Okay. I'm Quixotic and I'm a bus driver. And I'm gonna be the captain of this episode.
Hell yeah. I am Mubi, and my day job is I'm a male woman.
I'm tired dumbass. I'm an unemployed college student.
With that, I think we're
Okay.
ready to start the episode.
So, as someone who's sort of like instructed in teaching, and you always want to start the lesson with like a learning objective. So, like today's learning objective is going to be that like students will be able to apply historical materialism to describe the cancellation of the Constellation class of frigates for the United States Navy, right? And so, also in keeping with sort of educational best practices, we're going to use the Socratic method, wherein the lesson begins with the asking of questions and frequently features questions from the instructor to the students. Are we all familiar with the Socratic method?
I guess I am now.
Okay,
It's been a
great.
while since I've been in school.
All right. So, have either of you heard of the Jones Act? It's a United States piece of legislation from the 1920s.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but no, I.
Is it the one where they just started pumping out destroyers?
No, so the year I mean we do that a lot in our history, but this is actually
Fair
that's
enough.
that's sort of the big story here is this is the first time we've ever not been able to churn out a large number of small surface combatants very quickly. It's very weird. It's not weird. We'll see how interesting it is by the end of it. So the Jones Act is a 1920 piece of legislation that stipulates basically if you're an American shipping company, you have to use ships in your company that were built in the United States. So what this means, if you were going to use United States ports with like a few exceptions, right? You can apply for a waiver both as a United States company or as a foreign company. You can apply for a Jones Act waiver, which you apply to for of all people, the Border Patrol is who processes those. And basically saying, hey, even though I'm not an American company, or even though I am an American company, these are exceptional circumstances and I can get a waiver. I just wanted to include that because I thought it was really weird that you apply to the Border Patrol for a Jones Act exception.
That is weird.
It is weird. It's very strange. So basically what this means is that American shipping, American merchant shipping construction has a very, very small market. Because what a lot of American shipping companies did, sort of very gradually since the Jones Act passed, and then very rapidly since the 80s, they transfer to a different company and they use other countries' ships. Sorry, they transfer their company to a different country. So like a company will move to South Korea or Japan and start using South Korean or Japanese ships. For example, if you ever go on a Carnival cruise, it's the cruise line. I think they're based in North America. They sort of go all over the place. If you pay attention to the flag they fly from their mast, even though they brand themselves as an American company, they all fly the flag of Panama because they are a Panamanian company. All their ships are legally Panamanian merchant marine. And this is called a flag of convenience, and it sort of has slurped up all of what used to be America's formerly formidable merchant marine capacity. Ever since the 80s, the United States of America has had about 100, give or take, ships in its merchant marine. Ships get bigger all the time. Like the Panama Canal was expanded in the 90s, I think, off the dome. And so these ships keep getting wider and wider and wider. So in terms of tonnage, meaning the amount they can carry, that's slowly increasing, but the number of ships is more or less staying the same. And this is because if you're an American shipyard manufacturer, there aren't many American shipping companies anymore. And so why would you make merchant shipping in the United States? So who knows what a monopsony is? Have you ever heard the term monopsony?
No.
New term.
New term just dropped. There's going to be a lot of vocab words in this. I really hope you're taking notes. Number 1, Jones Act. Number 2, monopsony. A monopsony is like a monopoly. A monopoly is, of course, as we all know, when there's only one manufacturer of a product. A monopsony is the inverse of that. It's when there's only one purchaser of a product. For United States merchant shipping, it is a monopsony. It's usually not described as such, but it absolutely is. Almost all ships, period, merchant or not, built in the United States are purchased by the United States government, either by the Department of Defense or the Coast Guard or merchant fisheries, merchant protection, fisheries inspection, experimental vessels. Basically, the only purchaser of ships built in the Americas are this tiny amount of Jones-compliant companies and the United States government. So what is, vocab term number 3, what is neoliberalism?
That is a complicated...
That's a loaded gun of a question you just dropped on us.
Everyone knows what neoliberalism is.
Yeah, we're all living in it.
So, for those who may not know, neoliberalism is the governing ideology of the ruling class right now. It stipulates many things, but basically it asserts the perfection of the market as a method of distributing and creating commodities. And it also incentivizes very lean corporate structures, meaning that every member of your corporation should be, both member in terms of people and in terms of like organs and administrative bodies, should be dedicated towards the creation of capital. There is nothing to be gained in reinvesting or expansion, right? Everything should be as lean as possible. And so the government demand for naval vessels, is quite flat and also broadcasted very far in advance. Later, we're going to be talking about ship-making schedules. It's very normal for an American ship-making schedule that the U.S. Navy publishes a few times a year to extend 20 or 30 or even 40 years into the future. So they're very well broadcasted. There aren't very many changes in supply or demand, either for the Jones Act companies or the Department of Defense, or, civil government vessels, like non-warships that the government still buys. And so there is no reason to have any ship-making capability beyond what the government needs at any moment, because the government is the only buyer of merchant vessels, right? There is no overseas market for American merchant vessels. There is no overseas market for American warships. And so... basically, these companies are more efficient if they are at 100%. And they don't reach 100% by making more. They reach 100% by closing what they don't need, by closing dry docks and slips that they don't need and laying off workers that they don't need, right? In order to make the line go up, in order to make like the merchant line go up. And so this is very gradually, actually remarkably gradually, and it even predates Reagan and neoliberalism, actually. It kind of started happening ever since the Jones Act was passed in the 1920s. American merchant ship construction capability has steadily diminished over the course of the last 100 years. And to today, where we churn out extremely few vessels, actually most American ships built today are warships for the Navy or Coast Guard. And that is all of like our merchant ship making capability. That's it. That's sort of all there is. You may be sort of seeing the contours of where this is going to go at this point. Because
Yeah.
at this point, we're reaching our next vocabulary term, which is, what is a frigate?
It's a boat that is bigger than a like motorboat, but smaller than a destroyer.
So, depending on who you ask, there are a frankly dizzying amount of definitions for what a frigate is. Originally, a frigate was a sailing ship with one enclosed gun deck. If it was any bigger, if it had more than one, it was a ship of the line. If it had less than one, it was a corvette. And so it sort of used to refer to middle-sized ships. And this is all right. So the United States defines frigates in a slightly different manner than NATO does, because we used to use a definition that was more in keeping with the older Age of Sail definition, where a frigate it's sort of a medium-sized ship. They were between cruisers and destroyers. But the Brits, so during World War II, right, we're moving massive amounts of merchant shipping between, North America and Britain, because World War II is happening, and we gotta go give Jerry what's what, and what's what needs to be shipped from, Chicago to Plymouth, and then from there over to France, whatever, and then we can give Jerry what for. And so the Brits, merchant shipping doesn't move very fast. Well, it does now, but like at the time, the average speed of a merchant ship was about 10 knots. Whereas your average warship is maxes out about 30. So they built a class of destroyer. The Americans called them destroyer escorts. The Brits called them frigates that were a little smaller than a destroyer and at a top speed of 15 knots. Brits call them frigates. And actually, the British term is what sticks internationally. The NATO definition of a frigate is based on the British terminology, which is the NATO term. The NATO definition of a frigate is like a surface combatant, right? So a ship that isn't a submarine and isn't an aircraft carrier and doesn't carry Marines. That's between 2,200 and 9,000 tons. Frigates have historically been specialized in fighting submarines, right? That's why they were invented, was to, to sink U-boats. But generally, as globally as trends shift towards smaller navies and navies of smaller ships, frigates tend to take on all roles. They are anti-air, they are anti-surface, they are electronic communication, and it's becoming pretty common for them to also take on special forces insertion or humanitarian relief, as they become the backbone of most navies these days. The reason I'm engaging in a narrative tool called foreshadowing right now. Yeah. So I said a few minutes ago, the United States used a different version of frigates. Our frigates were actually pretty big, and what the rest of the world called frigates, we called destroyer escorts. So during the Cold War in the 70s, the Soviet Union rolled out a class of ships, the Project 68 vessel. It was a light cruiser, a gun cruiser, very heavy, very big. And then the Soviets started a trend of larger, bigger, more powerful surface ships. And in the Cold War, people got obsessed with various gaps, right? There was an idea in the 40s, the 50s, Soviets have more bombers than us. It's called the bomber gap. And, Congress makes a big theme about it until, Kennedy increases defense spending. And then there's the missile gap. And kind of the space race addresses that. This is sort of the big gap panic of the 70s, is the cruiser gap. That while we have more ships than the Soviet Union, which was always true, our ships are smaller and worse than theirs. And so this garners fears of a cruiser gap. And so the way the cruiser gap is resolved is by not changing shipbuilding or the force composition of the Navy one bit, and instead redefining what a cruiser is. So all of the things that were frigates or destroyer leaders, they get reclassified as cruisers, and everything that was a destroyer escort is now a frigate. The United States, by adopting the internationally accepted definition of frigate, closes the cruiser gap overnight because it never actually existed in the first place. Keep this in mind. This concept of a gap never existing in the first place and it being defined out of existence in order to make Congress happy. All right, just keep that
like fighting your own shadow too.
Yeah, just keep that in the back of your mind. So in the United States Navy today, sort of fast forwarding from the 70s to today, the United States has three categories of like surface warship, right? There's the big ones, which are cruisers, and we have middle ones, which are destroyers, and then we have this little thing called the littoral combat ship. So these there's sort of a category of people who are just sitting forward who've now been activated because we're gonna slander the LCS for a little bit. So the littoral combat ship was built to replace Cold War era frigates and minesweepers, sort of all in one category of vessel called the littoral combat ship, the LCS. These are frigates in a legal sense. They are surface combatants between 2,200 and 9,000 metric tons, but they're shit is kind of the thing. These are built for the global war on terror, where sort of your main threat is not in blue water, in like the open ocean, but is much closer to the coast. They're a lot more worried about mines. They have very, very light armament. They are very, very lightly built. They are very, very lightly crewed. They are basically disposable ships. They have a lifespan of about 10 to 15 years. And there are two classes of them, the Freedom class and the Independence class. They are modified, like, Baltic Sea ferries by design. The design was purchased by American companies, and these things are sort of, they're made, you can make them very quickly, you make them very cheaply. They work for 15 years. They're good enough for what they do, sort of controversial opinion. They can do the minesweeping. They can do the sort of sow the flag presence. They do all these sort of like semi-combat operations sort of between fighting and law enforcement that the Navy just ends up getting saddled with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very good in sort of like a stand-up war, but that's not what they were built for. So I said we're going to slander them, but I basically accept a position of moral neutrality on the concept of the littoral combat ship.
Fair enough.
So we have like our big cruisers, the Ticonderoga class, usually just called a Tycho. The Arla Burke class of destroyers, usually just called an Arla or a Burke. And then we have the LCSs, right? So all told, there are, like, we have 11 Tychos and 73 Arlas. No frigates, technically. Like, according to the Navy, it has no frigates. According to the rest of the world, it has 26 frigates. They're just LCSs. Now, the People's Republic of China has, in the last 15 to 20 years, undergone a massive naval armament. You can't even call it a rearmament because they never had a navy. Massive naval armament, and quite suddenly became a blue water navy over the course of the last 15, but really over the course of the last 10 years. Okay, there's a little causal loop here, a feedback loop I need to trail. So it's like, because of budget decreases and because ships are getting more expensive, we keep our ships in service for longer. Right, and so if we keep our ships in for longer, that means the sort of broadcasted demand for them is reduced. You don't need to build as many. If you don't commission as many, not as many get built, and so you don't have enough to replace your existing classes, which causes your existing ships to be stretched into further and further lifespans, right? So the ships live longer, which causes their replacements to be delayed, which causes the ships to live longer. You see the problem here, right?
Yes.
In China, they don't have this problem because China is the world's leading producer of ships, period.
Huh.
And so, especially now, as sort of Japan and South Korea, who are the other big shipbuilders of the world, are starting to, as their countries get older, their economy becomes more financialized and less industrial, their shipyards are beginning to shrink much, much slower. And they're still much, much larger than the United States, but they are beginning to shrink. China's is massively expanding in output. I should have gotten numbers for this, but like, the number of Chinese ships being produced, it is increasing. You're just going to have to take my word for it.
One number is getting bigger while the other number is getting smaller. That's what you have to see.
Exactly.
You can notice the number is getting bigger.
I didn't even talk about the Zumwalt class of ships. This is sort of the other boondoggle along with the LCS. that comes out of like, how do we do a counter-terrorist navy that ends up going nowhere. That would be a fun aside, but alas, that we'll have to do that later, I guess. The People's Republic of China, the People's Liberation Army Navy, yes, that's what it's called. That is the official
Incredible name.
English name of their navy. They possess 8 cruisers to our 11, right? 42 destroyers to our 73,
Mm-hmm.
but 50 frigates to our either 0 or 26,
Right.
depending on who you ask.
Just change up the definition.
Just make a couple destroyers into frigates. It's fine.
Well, it's sort of remember that it's sort of the literal combat ship is not a frigate. No other country recognizes or uses littoral combat ship as a designation or type of vessel.
It's like the Gulf of Mexico.
It's like the Gulf of Mexico. Only some Americans call it that. And so it's sort of adding together all the numbers of principal surface combatants. The United States has slightly more, right? It's when you put in all the things together, the United States has slightly more principal surface combatants than China. Problem. If you like pull open, let's sort of mentally, if you pull open a map of China and a map of the United States, right? So you'll see China has like an ocean to its east, and to the west, there's a bunch of land. Whereas if you pull up your mental map of the United States real quick, to the east, there is also an ocean, but there's also an ocean in the west. Even though the United States does have more principal surface combatants than China, we're a 2-ocean navy, and China's a 1-ocean navy. No matter what, this gap is probably, technically doesn't exist, but is also kind of insurmountable, because we would need to double the number of ships that we have now to close it.
Yeah, with no real shipbuilding capability.
With no real shipbuilding capability. So say, for example, you're the Congress of the United States of America, right? And you are us visibly seeing the rapid expansion of Chinese blue water sea power at the same time that American sea power is stagnating and also kind of slowly collapsing right now. Because the literal combat ship will be useless in any confrontation with China. So this becomes kind of a problem. And so the LCS is too small. There's too few destroyers and cruisers. And so you need a real frigate. You need to build a lot of them very quickly. The Navy sort of, because it's sort of the time frame that the Navy works on in terms of ship procurements, the exact number doesn't really matter and is more of a vibes-based thing. So every year, the number of ships the Navy says it needs changes somewhat, because we're talking 30 years in the future anyways. These are all hypotheticals.
I love me a vibe space navy.
Absolutely. And so in 2019, the Navy comes up with a concept that it's sort of like, we're gonna build between 48 and 58 proper frigates. Like frigates as both us and the rest of the world understand them. A proper fighting ship with like a 32 cell vertical launch system. It means it holds about 32 missiles. That's sort of very specifically drawn up as a opponent to the Chinese. It's a Type 54A frigate, which is almost all of the 50 frigates that China has are made of these. They make about 3 or 4 of them a year. So this is going to be the type of ship that one shipyard can churn out 1 or 2 of them a year. And they're gonna, they're not gonna outgun the Type 54A, because that's not the point, but they are gonna, they will be a tier above, just because American systems are better tested, American sailors are better tested. It's very much designed with the Type 54A in mind. And so it can't be just like an upgun to LCS, even though that is something the Navy is relatively successfully pursuing right now, putting more missiles on a literal combat ship.
Just put more DACA on it.
Just put more, and they are, and it's, you can't say no to more DACA.
Never.
And so the big sort of thing of this 2019 sort of idea that the Navy is having, sort of late Trump, early Biden era decision, is in order to save time and reduce risk of making a bad design by accident, we're going to use an existing ship design. Like, we're not going to design a ship from scratch. We'll take an existing ship design. We'll just sort of tweak it to make it so it fits American sensors and radars and weapon systems and how Americans make ships. And we'll do that. We're going to churn this out really, really quickly. We're going to award the contract for them early 2020, and we're expecting the first delivery in 2024. From design to ship in ocean ready to go in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so a number of countries and ships participate. Fincantieri Marinette Marine submits the FREM design, the frigate European multi-mission, which is the frigate used by mostly the French and the Italians. They have a shared design, which is the growing trend in European defense, is to have a shared design that's designed and built by multiple countries in very, very close collaboration.
Seems convenient.
Very convenient, because, you know, each individual European economy on its own is kind of dinky, but once you plug them together, it's like, okay, well, this is a force to be reckoned with. A company submits a design for a existing Coast Guard naval cutter, the existing Coast Guard cutter, but, you know, with missiles and guns on it and stuff. There's two patterns of LCS, one made by Lockheed Martin, and the other one made by Austal, like the Australian company. Each of them submits a design. General Dynamics submits a design for the Alvaro de Bazan, which is sort of an existing class of frigates used by the French. And Atlas North America, a company I had never heard of before making this, submits a modified version of the Meko 200 class of ships, which is an export-oriented frigate used by a variety of countries. It's sort of probably most famous as being the Anzac class of frigates used by Australia and New Zealand. And so the United States Navy, they look at all these designs and they pick the FREM. Pretty hard to oppose the choice of FREM. It's in design, but they are still currently being manufactured. France and Italy are extremely happy what they are turning out. They are luxurious. They are big.
Like a Ferrari.
Good comparison, because it's the Italian one that the Navy actually picks to pattern it off of. All senior officers have a one-bed wardroom. The junior officers share two. And the crew, it's only 4 ratings to a bedroom, which for a naval vessel, especially an American naval vessel, is like unimaginable luxury. They are quiet. They have, 32 cells. It's a good design. It's a well-designed ship. It's designed by Italians and French, so it's like, it works. It's comfortable. You can sail them around the world. They have good AC.
That's crazy for a European design.
I know, right? This is a good choice of design. The problem is FREM, the company, it's made by a company called the Naval Group and Fincantieri together. So it's technically like an Italian, Spanish, French design. Italy, Spain, and France buy their missiles from MBDA and their electronics from Thales. European companies. They don't buy American.
Euro stuff.
They don't buy American for their naval products. They make their own. And so it needs, instead of having the MBDA launcher, it's called the Silver VLS, it needs to be replaced for the Mark 41 American system. The gun is made by OTO Melara. It needs to be replaced by an American gun. The electronics are made by Thales. They need to be replaced by American radars, right? The design needs to be pretty substantially modified to fit like existing American systems, like legacy systems that need to be introduced on it, right? Americanizing the design is the sort of the main thing about
put the American frosting on the Italian ship.
Exactly. And so if you actually look at, and this is sort of where the first cracks in the story begin to form, the immediate ones, not the long-term ones. If you look at an actual computer rendering of what this ends up being, the Constellation class of frigates, it looks very different from a FREM. It's a pretty extensive redesign, but the redesign is pitched to the Navy, and the Navy selects the sort of like Americanized FREM on April 30th, 2020. Now, I know it was a long time ago, but do either of you remember what was happening in the world in April 2020?
There was this
The-
little thing called COVIDs.
The novel coronavirus pandemic hits basically exactly when Fincantieri needs to be hammering out and laying down these ships. Remember, the Navy is expecting the first one by 2024.
Yeah.
But the novel coronavirus pandemic is happening. And so they have to basically suspend the design of it, the construction of it, and how it's going. And there was a lot of really high enthusiasm for the Constellation class in 2019. Like, regardless of which design was going to be chosen, because we're going to make a lot of them. We're going to make 50-ish of them. We're going to make them quickly. They're an existing design. It's a nice design. Like, sailors were excited to serve aboard Constellation class vessels because they were going to be nice. And like they're, you know, surface combatants. You get a lot of ports of call because, you know, you can park the ship in more and more interesting places. Like, it's perfectly capable. It's VLS capable, so you're going to have like more types of job aboard the ship, so more sailors have an actual chance of serving aboard them. Whereas, you know, the LCSs are so small and so lightly crewed, only some jobs in the Navy are needed to make them go. And like, there was a lot, like, one of the things I read for this was in 2019 during the competition, the Italian Navy sort of parked a frem in I think New York Harbor, maybe Norfolk, probably Norfolk actually. And
Oh
we're just
my
sort of
God.
like, hey, we're the Italian Navy. We're sort of here on behalf of our good friends at Bergamini, Fincantieri. Just sort of, we're offering press tours of the Frem to, you know, industry professionals and lawmakers, just whoever wants to get a hold of them.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
you can, there's a lot of like really cool primary source reporting on what the inside of a Frem looks like.
This is like when your neighbor is like working for Ferrari and then just comes over to your house with his own Ferrari
And it's like,
being
hey, do you want to ride? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of, like, by Naval News and by the U.S. Naval Institute, there's like a lot of people get guided tours of the Frem, and they are genuinely impressed. The Navy is impressed, sailors are impressed. The novel coronavirus pandemic, right? And as COVID is happening, the Navy just sort of stops existing. The ships that were already afloat when the pandemic happened, they keep them floating as long as they can so the crew aren't exposed to COVID. But eventually, you just need to park the ship in harbor and let the sailors out, and they're gonna get COVID because they're sailors and they're stupid. And you're just kind of not gonna have a Navy until like 2023, and no one has a Navy until 2023. The progress of COVID through Charles de Gaulle, like the French aircraft carrier, is really, really well documented because they had like an early super spreader event from a point of call that just laid out the ship like overnight. So France went from having the only non-American nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the world to no aircraft carrier because of COVID in like 3 weeks. The Navy sort of quietly reports. So, okay, when I say Constellation, I'm talking about the class, and I'm talking about the first ship, which is called USS Constellation. I'm just going to call it FFG 62, like its designation, its number.
That's
so
fair.
that we've got these separated in our minds. Before even 2024, in 2021, 1 year into the pandemic, when Fincantieri is supposed to have already started construction on FFG 62, the Navy quietly reduces the amount of constellations it will be buying from Fincantieri from between 48 and 58 to 12.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
That's like a quarter.
Yes, it is.
Less
And
than
then
actually.
it's very few, especially considering you have to split these between two oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. And then in January 2024, remember, FFG 62 was supposed to be delivered in 2024. It was supposed to be done in 2024.
Yeah.
In January, the Navy announces it's been delayed by a year, right?
Right.
They haven't started building it yet.
Oh.
And the original timeline from laying down the delivery was 4 years. And the Navy's saying, we'll have it next year. Done. The ship hasn't started yet. In March 2024, 3 months later, the Navy says, we said a year, it's more like 15 months. They're saying this 3 months later. In April 2024, the Navy expands the length of the delay from 15 months to 3 years. And it is only at this point that Fincantieri actually starts building the thing. After the Navy announces a 3-year delay in the acquisition of FFG 62. So in May 2024, the Government Accountability Office, which is sort of an organ of the United States government that keeps costs from overrunning, reports, they do an investigation into Fincantieri, into the Navy, and they find out that, yes, they have actually started building it, but they haven't finished the design yet. Like, the design is not finished, and they've already started building it with the idea that they're just gonna wing it and make the modifications on the fly that they need in order for it to be delivered by 2027, to reach the delivery date of 2027.
One question though.
Yes.
Wasn't the entire, like, part of the deal, like, modifying an existing design because you can do it very quickly? Like,
yes. They just didn't feel like it, because you know, drawing back to early lesson 1, we're thinking about in terms of like the Jones Act, right? No shipbuilding company should have anything more than the bare minimum they need to fulfill their government contracts, right? And this is a quick turnaround government contract. We're going to make 58 of these in 10 years and the first 12 in 4, right? This is extremely quick turnaround. This is a crash building program.
Right.
And so historically, the reason we've been able to fulfill these crash building programs over time, we take our existing merchant shipping and we just retool it for a military design. We don't have existent merchant shipping anymore because we only make 2 or 3 merchant ships a year. And so you have to, all of a sudden, you have to hire new naval architects to convert this design from one thing to another. Fincantieri, like the original Italian designers of this, are being relatively protective of their IP. And so they're not like giving the American Fincantieri company full access to like existing things. But also American Fincantieri wants to make this all in-house so that they can recoup all the losses and make as much money as possible. So they're not subcontracting the design. They're not subcontracting smaller components of this. They are trying to design the entire thing in-house by using new staff with people new hiring in the middle of the novel coronavirus pandemic.
And also they've never worked on this ship.
No. And in fact, Fincantieri, the ship they made before this, was one of the literal combat ships. It was one of the LCS patterns. So they are going from making aluminum-hulled modified ferries to warships with no experience. And they have to wait a while for a slip to clear, because like every ship company has a very finite number of slips, fewer than you'd think as well. Like Naval Group, who makes every ship for the French, they have only like 6 slips to make every so you can only be making 6 ships at once, and you have to finish the one you're on before you can go on to the next one. And so there's regular industrial delays because of COVID, and then it's only it takes until 2024 for a slip to be clear, and then they lay it down, and they haven't finished the design yet. This really leads us to our sort of like our final vocab, our final sort of Socratic method. Who is Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense / War?
I know one thing.
What do you know? What do you know? I'm curious what like non-freaks know about him.
I know that he's like it's very known that he's like an alcoholic.
Yes, that is true.
And then that he's like quite often like drunk at press conferences.
Yeah, he's like visibly drunk. He was like, there was one session of his Senate hearing that he was like visibly intoxicated at.
I know it was very important for him to rename the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of War because it sounded cooler.
It sounded cooler, even though he doesn't have the authority to do that, so legally the name hasn't changed. It's a subtitle, so it's like the Department of Defense, the Department of War. He's still Secretary of Defense, but he calls himself Secretary of War. So there's sort of two big things that come with like the Hegsetification of American defense, right? Which is sort of, there's sort of one half of it, which is we're going to do so many war crimes. And then the other half of it, which is like, we're going to make the defense industry more like the tech industry. And so...
Oh no.
What if a ship was a Bitcoin?
It's more like, what if a ship was a Tesla? It's like both of these trends, the increasing war crimesification and the increasing tech industryification of the military, have been going on for decades, but they are massively accelerating these days. So Pete Hegseth will do this thing where he will cancel an existing developmental program in favor of something that like does not exist, right? So he is canceling purchases of a lot of new, for example, Army aircraft, Blackhawks and Apaches, in favor of something called the Future Long Range AA. I think it's called the Valor is the name of the helicopter. It's very stupid. It's like a tiny Osprey. And so it literally is a tiny Osprey. It's a tilt rotor aircraft.
Because those have been like historically very successful.
Because the tilt rotors definitely, this is very much the tech industry, because the tilt rotor, unproven technology, right? Hard to do at scale. We're not really good at handling them yet. So let's go replace the Black Hawk with them. That will go fine.
Our most important helicopter.
Yes. He's replacing, like, canceling the Booker, the M10 Booker, the sort of light tank that was going to go to the airborne and light infantry. And he's sort of most notoriously, and I think this is when he finally got a lot of industry professionals of Congress mad at him, tried to replace the E7, which is the like airborne electronics plan that's going to replace the E3. Cancel the E7 in favor of, we'll just put radars on satellites and have them be our AWACS. But also, it's like we're focusing on rapid turnaround, and we're going fast, and we're making things work, and we're working things on the fly, like how they do in Ukraine. That's not really how things work in Ukraine.
Yeah, move fast and break things.
Exactly, move fast and break things. And so today, Secretary of the Navy, presumably under the direction of Pete Hegseth, canceled the Constellation class, except for FFG 6.2 and FFG 6.3, who have already been started. This capacity for 50-ish frigates still exists. It's still in official Navy documentation, and the Secretary of the Navy affirmed today that they're still going to have to do it. And so it just brings, we're still need to build these.
Right.
But now we're just sort of starting over again. We're going to have a Constellation. We're going to have, what is FFG 6.3 going to be named? Congress. That's funny. We're going to have the USS Constellation and USS Congress. And realistically speaking, these two ships are going to be sold to an overseas navy, probably Poland. And so we're just sort of going to work it out. We're going to do this all over again.
Yeah, but this time time
we'll do it correct? Because that's the thing. The reason that this failed, right, isn't because of the FREM as a design, isn't because of Fincantieri as a manufacturer. It's because of the Jones Act. It's because of neoliberalism. I mean, a lot of it is also because of COVID. But these structural causes are still in place. And right. So until you build up the manufacturing base for merchant shipping and you can retool that over to warships, this gap is always still gonna exist. And the problem with this gap is you could redefine the LCS as a frigate and make it go away overnight. That's not gonna make the LCS any better of a ship. And it takes, as China's proven, it takes 30 years to build up a merchant shipping capability that strong, a shipping industry that big. Repealing the Jones Act would do something, maybe, in order to build up merchant shipping again and cause investment in merchant shipping again. But merchant shipping isn't a good investment because the Jones Act ships are really only used to ferry cargo between American ports. All of our imports are done via overseas shipping. As the delays in shipbuilding increase, the delays increase, so the replacements are delayed, and so ships stay longer, and we're just going to get an older, worse Navy until it's China time. And I wish them all the best. Because we found this sort of ridiculous situation in which the only reason you would ever build a ship in the United States is for the Navy, and the Navy is sort of imperiled by both like a lack of political will at home to decide what to do it with, a lack of economic will to invest in shipbuilding because there's no reason to because of the Jones Act, and as our economy just in general sort of declines, since the Reagan era. This is sort of like there's sort of a perfect slice here. A blue water navy is inherently an imperialist tool, and imperialism exists to economically benefit the metropole. But as the metropole just sort of destroys its own economy in order to financialize more of itself, you actually lose the ability to do the empire in the first place, right? So there's sort of, recall the feedback loop of slowdowns in shipbuilding resulting in older ships, resulting in slowdowns of shipbuilding. The decline of economic ability, the economy of the metropole, leads to a reduction of the empire's power projection ability, which leads to a worsening economic condition in the metropole, right?
Right.
So,
there
we go. That is
China
Saga. And in conclusion, Your Honor, it's China time. It's been China time.
What we've learned today here is that China time.
It's China time. And it's something that I think was also, this is sort of like a really, I think, an interesting case of imperial decline. The inability of the United States of America to build 8 small ships. But what's sort of the peak irony, and there's a reason I'm saving this for last, the Constellation class of ships, the imperial decline class frigate, they were all going to be named after sort of places, locations, and ideas related to the American Revolution. FFG 62 is Constellation, FFG 63 is Congress, FFG 64 is Chesapeake, FFG 65 is Lafayette, FFG 66 is Hamilton, and for the last 3 of the class, they gave up and named them after 3 random people. And so it's really weird to have such a direct causal link between economic policies and broader political shifts to like a tangible headline than this. Usually things are more multi-causal, which is that's why I knew I could talk about this for like an hour. How this parallels with the previous Cold War cruiser gap with our sort of why is it a given that we need to compete with China in the first place in the realm of surface combatants, which is not the U.S. Navy's strong suit. The U.S. Navy's strong suit is in naval aviation and submarines. By any objective standard, we outclass China by massive margins. Way more aircraft carriers, way more capable aircraft carriers, way more submarines, way more capable submarines. Why are we even worried? Way better planes. Why are we even worried that we have a shortage of ships between 2,200 and 9,000 metric tons? Perhaps some ideology is at play here.
The US needs to grow and be better at everything, you see.
Yeah, otherwise, the US is gained. It's humiliated.
And here we are sort of butting up against sort of, it's not, I mean, it's partly lack of will. It's partly just the material reality that's just sort of like, actually, I think we're locked into the decline spiral. It would be really, even if there were the political will to turn it around, which there isn't, it would be really, really, really hard.